I'm fine. How are you, Your Excellency?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for the interest that you have in Russia and in our bilateral relations. Why are you interested in Russia?
Well, first of all, I read a lot of books about Russia's history, about
Oh, that's great.
Russia's politics also, which is kind of interesting. And not because I want to interfere, but I want to, of course, learn as a student. And of course, I have this hope that one day I can lead the country and then have a close tie with Russia, more close than ever.
But you haven't been to Russia yet.
I was supposed to visit Russia last year for a holiday, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we failed to visit Russia.
Okay, hopefully when the pandemic is over, you will be able to
Yeah.
visit Russia, which I can assure you is a very beautiful and interesting
Yes.
country.
I look at the places to visit in Russia. I think it's really interesting. I really look forward to visit Moscow also, and other cities, of course.
Well, for the first time, maybe Moscow and St. Petersburg is enough, but if you come again, then of course the Asian part of Russia would be very interesting,
True.
which is closer to the region where Indonesia is.
Okay, so thank you, Your Excellency, for giving me the chance to have an interview with Your Excellency. And I have a couple of questions that I will ask Your Excellency. The first question, of course, we have a very close bilateral relations since many years ago. It started after our independence as a country, Indonesia. But with many cooperations and collaboration, which sector or which part is the most striking part of our diplomacy?
That's an interesting question, of course. Yes, indeed. In Russia, we see Indonesia as our key partner, not only among ASEAN countries. Of course, Indonesia is the informal leader among ASEAN countries and a very influential player in the Muslim world. Of course, you know, if you read so many books about Russia, that we have also a considerable Muslim population. Around different estimates, we have 20 million Muslims in our country, which is more than 10% of our population. And those are not migrants, but people who lived in Russia for centuries and are an integral part of Russian society. So, of course, that makes Indonesia a very important partner for Russia. Bilaterally and also in the framework of our cooperation with ASEAN. And our bilateral cooperation is quite diverse. Of course, last year, because of the pandemic, many things have been canceled and slowed down. Of course, we were looking and we were planning a bilateral meeting between our two leaders, which didn't happen. Either President Putin should have come to Jakarta or President Jokowi visited Russia, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But we still hope when the pandemic will be over, our two leaders will meet. Why are we so eager for the two leaders to meet? Well, it's important in itself because every meeting of the leaders gives a boost to the bilateral relations. But we prepared a big number of bilateral agreements and documents, and the most important one is the Declaration on Strategic Partnership. So we hope that when our two leaders will finally meet, they will sign this declaration, and our two countries, Russia and Indonesia, will become strategic partners. You know, we have only one country among ASEAN countries with whom we are a strategic partnership, and it is Vietnam. With this country, we have a long tradition of very friendly relations and cooperation. So we hope that such a great country as Indonesia also will be our strategic partner. Also, I would like to, of course, you know, bilateral relation has a lot of, as you know, has a lot of components. And last year, well, We've been exchanging goods.
Yeah.
Basically, as usual, our bilateral trade did not drop dramatically, maybe just a minus of 2 or 3%. But also, a big part of our relations is the tourist sector. You know that Russians just love coming to Indonesia, to Bali. Before the pandemic, we had 160,000 tourists in Bali alone, Russian tourists. But unfortunately, last year also these tourist exchanges became impossible. But what I would like to mention that Russia-Indonesia, we share a lot of similar views on what is happening in the world and what we need to do to improve the situation. And actually, you know that Indonesia was a non-permanent member in the Security Council of the UN, and Russia is the permanent member of the Security Council, and we work together on a big number of issues, and our views were quite similar. Just one example, you know that last year the United States tried to reintroduce sanctions against Iran,
Yeah.
the so-called snapback. And together with Indonesia and supported by other UN permanent and non-permanent members, actually we prevented that from happening because the United States didn't have any legal right to reintroduce sanctions because they came out of the plan of action with Iran. So that is just one example of how close and successfully we work together. Of course, one of the issues that is very important for everyone, it's a common threat. We cannot, just one country cannot overcome this threat, is the COVID pandemic. So last year, our leaders had a telephone conversation, President Putin and President Jokowi, and they reached some understandings that we need to work together. And actually, Russia, we share the view of Indonesia that every country, big or small, or poor or developed, should have equal access to the vaccine. And we are ready to cooperate, and we are actually cooperating with Indonesia in this area. So that's what I wanted to highlight.
Yeah. So, especially right now in the COVID-19 pandemic, I think Russia, Indonesia, and every other nations, we are all experiencing deaths, and also our citizens, it might be our family, our colleagues, they died, they also got sick. And so how does Russia and Indonesia collaborate specifically on the pandemic? Let's say sharing of the vaccines or the PPEs, or let's say simply just sharing of information, like previously the both presidents talked through the phone. But of course, in the lower agencies, there must be another collaboration as well.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Also, our ministries of health have discussed the ways to fight pandemic. And you know, of course, that Russia was the first country to register the anti-COVID vaccine. It is called Sputnik V. And we registered it in August last year. And in December last year, we've already started mass vaccination of our population with this Sputnik V, which is very efficient. You know that in the world, actually, there are only 3 vaccines right now that are more than 90% efficient. So it's Sputnik, it's Moderna, and Pfizer. All other vaccines they have a lower efficiency. We've started this vaccination now. We have around 4 million people who have been already vaccinated in Russia. Indonesia has already started also vaccination. It's like in Indonesia, it's in our country, it is free of charge. And it's a decision of the person. No one can push the person to have the vaccination. So it's voluntarily administered. Um, we actually are now in discussion with the government of Indonesia on how we can distribute the vaccine in Indonesia and how Indonesia can use it. So the process hasn't been completed yet, but we hope that Sputnik will be registered in Indonesia, and Indonesians will have access to this vaccine. Actually, for your information, we also have another 2 vaccines in Russia. We've developed 2 other vaccines that are also quite efficient. The second one is called Ipiwak Corona, and it is suitable for people who are older than 65 years. So we believe that together we will overcome the pandemic, and the life will return to normal, even not the new normal, but maybe the old normal as well. I hope I answered your question.
Yep, you do. So talking about the disease, pandemic crisis, to be honest, our world has been in a crisis since before the pandemic, and that crisis is climate crisis, of course. This is the thing that many individuals ignore: climate change, climate crisis. So, how does Russia, specifically the Russian government, tried to make sure that we battle this climate crisis together, both in a bilateral stage and also multilateral stage?
Well, Dim, as you see, there's different views actually on the climate changes, whether these climate changes are just a natural thing or it is induced by the actions of the human beings. So far, there hasn't been any proof actually that the climate changes that we're witnessing have been induced by human beings. Maybe we're too ambitious to think that we can change the climate. But having said that, of course, no one can deny that we need to pay special attention to environmental issues and to keep our environment clean, healthy, and suitable for people, animals, and all other living beings to live, actually. Russia has been part of all the agreements on climate changes and on the environment, international agreements. And like the US, we never left any of these agreements, and we're committed to all to these agreements. Um, in our country, we have government programs of environmental conservation and improvement of environment. For us, it's very important because our country is, as you know, is the biggest country in the world, actually, and the nature is very diverse. So to conserve the nature is one of the priorities of the government, and all the measures are taken to prevent the environment to be spoiled. So it is really important, and we're ready to cooperate with on bilateral or multilateral level